For years, we have speculated on the fact that Swift will be essentially replaced, and Ripple was always the prime candidate for the one that will basically replace Swift. And when we think about what's been happening around the financial space for the last couple of years, we could see that everything is shifting. We are shifting from the paper-based processes of yesterday, and now we are advancing into the digital-based processes of tomorrow. And when we think about this, we also look at the technology that is enabling all of this. And guess what? The last time I checked, Swift does not have that technology. So we look at this new technology, we look at the players that are dominating this new technology space, and we kind of come back to names like, for an example, Ripple. And we come back to pieces of this space like XRP and the XRPL and what could actually happen when we tap into this type of technology. So in this video, I want to go over exactly how Ripple will replace Swift. And when we think about Ripple replacing Swift, I don't think that it's going to happen the way that everyone assumes it to happen, which again, we'll also go over that. So let's actually start off with why we focus on Swift, because Swift came out back in 1973. And today they actually have over 11,500 institutional players tapped in across 200 countries and territories. Now, the biggest problem with Swift is the fact that, it is dominated by the US. We actually utilize the Swift network as a financial weapon. We have sanctioned countries using the Swift network. We have basically weaponized this network of 11,500 banks. And it's something that a lot of these nations out there just completely hate. They do not want to tap into the Swift network anymore. We go and look at Russia, right? We go back to 2022 when we announced sanctions against Russia in, I think it was like March of 2022. We weaponized Swift, we weaponized the US dollar, and that's why we have all of these nations trying to move away from the Swift network and from the dollar, and so far, a lot of them have been very successful in doing so, which is also taking some dominance away from Swift. Is it to the point where we could say, oh, that's it, like Swift is done, it's collapsing, it's finished? No, it's not at that point, but I do think that with these new technologies, we are going to see dominance from Swift usurped in a huge way. But what if there is a different plan? What if there is something that we're not actually seeing here, which is something that I think everyone should be made aware of, especially if you think about, Ripple replacing Swift and XRP, becoming that huge bridge currency globally. I think that this is going to be very important. So let's actually go over here to some of the recent acquisitions. So we go back to Hidden Road, right? Hidden Road was a huge one. We talked about it on multiple occasions. We said that it's going to be huge for Ripple and for RLUSD and even for XRP because they want to move $3 trillion per year over the XRP ledger. And this has 300 plus top financial institutional players tapped in. So this was definitely a big one. But it's not just this acquisition. It's also the recent acquisition of Rail, because again, these two go hand in hand. What we are witnessing here is Ripple creating an institutional infrastructure stack around blockchain and around tokenized assets. This is something that's going to become even larger over time. We go back to when Swift got, created back in 1973. From 1973 to now, Swift has always been looked at as that dominant force in the financial space, the prime network, if you will, that money moves over. This is changing. I do think that Ripple and all of the moves that they've been making over the last couple years, we go back 13 years ago to now, right? All of these moves have gotten us to this point where Ripple is becoming a very, very dominant force in the digital asset space, but also even in the financial, system. Now, if we're thinking about Rail, the reason why Rail is so big is because of just one simple thing, which is the fact that they power 10% plus of all B2B stablecoin volume. Now, if we're thinking about this, okay, stablecoins are becoming that dominant piece of the crypto space where we are now making up over 1+% of the global M2 supply. I actually just talked about a prediction around like 2030 of about how much of the M2 supply could be tied back to stablecoins. It's a very large number. And that number is only going to continue to grow more and more and more. I do think that stablecoins eventually will be the dominant piece of the global M2 supply, making up well over 10+% of it, and eventually probably 100% of the global M2 supply. Everything is moving on chain. Everything is being tokenized. This is not slowing down. In fact, it's accelerating. Now, a lot of people said that the Rail acquisition was the big Swift warning. For an example, Paul Barron did put out a post regarding the Swift warning. Ripple just acquired Rail Finance for $200 million. This isn't just another crypto acquisition. It's a strategic play that could reshape how businesses move money globally. What Rail brings to the table: processes 10% of the $36 billion global B2B stablecoin payments market, turns days-long wire transfers into hours-long settlements, stablecoin sandwich tech that bridges fiat and digital seamlessly, virtual accounts and automated back-office infrastructure. Why this matters for businesses: cross-border payments that settle in minutes, not days, costs reduced by 80% versus traditional banking, 24/7 settlement, no more waiting for bank hours, full compliance and regulatory framework. Ripple now has the infrastructure to challenge Swift's dominance in the $3 trillion cross-border payments market. Now, when we think about what's actually going on here, okay, every single move that Ripple has been making is a strategic play. It's all a part of the push on the internet of value. Now, the question here is Swift going to be a part of this or not? Because again, when we think about these acquisitions like Rail Finance, everyone's like, all right, well, Ripple's just making more and more moves to counter Swift. That are going up against Swift. Even over here, if we look at what vet_x0 put out talking about the Rail acquisition, it supports SEPA, Fedwire, ACH, and even Swift payment rails, among a few others. If we are thinking about this, okay, there's multiple networks tapped in here. These payment rails are crucial because, again, Swift is being tapped in. Remember what I've always said about Swift. Swift does not clear and settle payments. They are a messaging network. There is other players tied to Swift that actually do the clearing and settlement side of the payments, which is why it takes so long. When we think about this, idea of, Ripple's going to replace Swift, we don't need to, because we are doing everything outside of what Swift does as well. Which means that if Swift wanted to, and if Swift wants to, stay around for years going forward, they should tap into what Ripple is trying to do here. They should not only tap into what Ripple is trying to do here, but they should adopt digital assets and DLT into their infrastructure for settlement and messaging. Even if they don't for messaging, settlement and clearing is crucial. If Swift wants to handle the messaging, that's fine. In fact, with ISO 20022, it clears up a lot of the problems around messaging, which allows for DLT and blockchain and digital assets all to be tapped in. So this means that Swift could be working with Ripple using the XRP ledger at some point in time. And also we have over here, from subjective views, is Ripple ready to compete with Swift? This is from Casey Craddock. I think there is a world where we both coexist. Our customers really just want to be able to send money instantly, cost effectively around the globe. We just need to enable a better customer experience. Listen closely.
Let's look at Ripple. Now, where is it as it stands today in terms of, say, cross-border transactions? Is it ready to compete with, say, Swift?
Well, like you mentioned, we started out trying to solve the multi-trillion-dollar cross-border payment challenge, and blockchain technology really solves that pain point. And we've been doing this now for over a decade, and have processed over $70 billion, and can pay out comfortably to 90 markets around the world, which is very different to some of our competitors in the market. And this really gives us this opportunity to leapfrog. Now, your direct question around Swift, I think there's a world where we both coexist. Our customers really just want to be able to send money instantly, cost effectively around the globe, and whether or not that's using blockchain technology or other tools, really we just need to be able to enable a better customer experience. And what we've seen from an industry perspective is this heightened interest in stablecoins, because stablecoins really do solve that problem. And the nature of blockchain technology is it's truly global, and that's really kind of the benefit from a customer experience perspective. Now, more broadly speaking, solving the cross-border payment challenge has enabled us to build digital asset infrastructure that we're now banks and financial institutions such as SocGen Forge, BBVA are leveraging that technology really to build their own business. And continued evolution of regulation will only further that business model for us.
And when we think about this, right, Ripple's main focus here isn't to replace Swift. They are not focused on Swift. Their main idea here is to make sure that there is a better way to move money around the world. How can we improve that? This has always been their focus. They never even cared about Swift. Obviously, if Swift doesn't want to tap into this new technology, they will replace themselves. That's as simple as it is. So there is a world where Ripple and Swift can work together. David Schwartz has said this many times over. I think that this is the way that, everything will work out. I think that Swift is aware of this, right? We go back to ISO 20022. This is going to be the big thing to focus on. November of this year is pretty much the cutoff date, right? We've been focused on it. The main thing about what ISO 20022 enables is it enables this new technology to be tapped in. And we even have over here from the Global Head of Innovation Engineering at Swift, Rachel Levy, as new forms of value transfer such as tokenization and digital assets come to the fore, a common standard is ISO 20022 will be especially important to avoid fragmentation. And yeah, this is going to be the big thing that actually unlocks more adoption of digital assets and the entire crypto space. It doesn't matter if cryptocurrencies are ISO 20022 compliant or not. In fact, most of them are not. The main thing about like even XRP, and this is where a lot of people kind of get confused. With XRP, Ripple is the one that's ISO 20022 compliant, right? It allows for XRP to be utilized within Ripple because, again, Ripple is ISO 20022 compliant, which is a huge plus one. But at the end of the day, no cryptocurrency is ISO 20022 compliant. But the thing is that this is the standard that actually unlocks these digital currencies and these DLTs to be tapped in this new world of finance. It also, when it comes to this standard, it's a mandate on these big banks to actually integrate with new technology forms. So this is going to really accelerate the adoption of DLT and blockchain and tokenized forms of value. And what's crazy about all of this is we go back to about the end of 2023, where there was a Converge podcast, which was titled New Rails to New Worlds, Building Inclusive Innovative Infrastructures for Global Payments. And we know that the head of payment products at Ripple was, talking alongside the head of digital assets at Citi, and also the global head of payments and PMI at Swift as well, which I just find crazy. But we also go back to that post from Swift back in the beginning of this year, where we have the emergence of digital assets has the potential to create new, innovative, and effective ways of trading securities. But despite the promise, the tokenization landscape remains fragmented, limited its scalability, and broad adoption. And that's why we look at the 5 key things that could be tackled to forge robust digital asset ecosystems, which interoperability is a big one. Fragmentation of data is another one, which ISO 20022 actually solves. Interoperability is already being solved. But the fact that Swift is looking at this tells us that Swift wants to innovate. They want to tap into digital assets. They want to tap into tokenization. And it's the same exact reason why I look at stablecoins and how big stablecoins are becoming and what networks have the most amount of stablecoins on them. We already know that the XRP ledger has about roughly 7 stablecoins coming to it. RLUSD is one, EUROP is another one, V is another one. There's so many different stablecoins launching on the XRP ledger. But when we're thinking about all of this, it just goes back to all of those acquisitions with Ripple. They are acquiring these specific companies to make sure that they are really grasping a large portion of the stablecoin market flow, but also the institutional side of the market as well. Ripple is becoming crucial institutional infrastructure. They are essentially the Swift of the digital age, if I would like to describe it that way. But the main thing here is Ripple, is their main goal to replace Swift? I don't think so. I think that at the end of the day, the main focus here from Ripple is to change the way that money moves around the world. Make sure that it's extremely efficient. And if that leads them to replacing Swift, so be it. But I don't think that it's going to. I think that Swift is going to be forced to tap into this space. I think that they already are. I think that a lot of these posts from Swift talking about digital assets and tokenization and things like that, it tells us that Swift is eager to actually work with this space. We already know that Swift has been doing trials with Chainlink and the DTCC to move tokenized assets. So it makes a lot of sense that Swift would tap into some of these players. And we already know that David Schwartz said on multiple occasions that the dream scenario, which we don't know if it's going to be a realistic scenario, would be Swift to, utilize Ripple's products. They could even, pay a small fee, if you will, to tap into it. And this would allow Swift to work with Ripple. They would have extremely efficient clearing and settlement. They already solved the messaging. So again, this would be the perfect scenario to innovate the global payment flow, completely revolutionize the financial system, and Swift can remain a giant in the digital age. It makes a lot of sense. Will that happen? We don't know, but I do think that the plan here is much bigger than we think. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, Nick, thanks for watching. Peace out.